Tic Tac quiz time. What do the US Navy, the UFO community, Ross Coulthart, and myself all have in common? We were all wrong about the Tic Tac. I was contacted by technology researcher Joshua Bertrand, who claims to know exactly what the Tic Tac was, the classified name of the program, the history of this technology, who designed and really built it, who tested it and used it, and most of all, how it works. Of course, he might be wrong, but that's for you to determine. So I interviewed Joshua and asked him these difficult questions. Was the Tic Tac alien technology? Why Commander Fravor didn't think it was built in the USA? How did it move so fast? And why was it seen during the Nimitz training exercise? What Joshua shared with me upsets everybody's apple cart. It's revisionist history. Exactly the type of research that lets the cat out of the bag. So here's Joshua. Listen to what he told me.
Hey, everybody. This is an absolute honor to have Joshua Bertrand back. So Joshua first contacted me, I was just looking it up, in November 2023. So welcome back, Joshua. It's been a very interesting year with the Tic Tac raising its head again, very much through Ross Coulthart coming out with this piece of information that he got that it was a Lockheed Martin craft, which goes along with what you told me. I mean, you are the source of all this man-made stuff. So, Joshua, first of all, is the Tic Tac man-made?
I do believe that the Tic Tac is man-made, and I think that it's part of a evolutionary technology chain that's been advanced since the early 1900s, late 1800s, of lighter-than-air technologies in aerospace. I believe that these craft are aerostats. They've been developed, as you said, by Department of Energy, by DARPA, by the DoD, and by several military contractors in the United States and in Western nations that are allied, including Canada and Great Britain.
One of the obvious possible craft descriptions of the Calvin craft, which is obviously a buoyant craft of some type, unless it's alien, which is always there, seen over Scotland, it was almost definitely an observational drone or a laser targeting system, and it's a buoyant craft, and that either is American or it was built by BAE Systems. So yeah, there is a history. These things exist. And why do you think it was seen just a few miles off the coast of San Diego? Why there?
Well, I quite agree with your theory on that. The military operational area is where these third-party contractors and Department of Energy would be testing their advanced craft, right, as well as where the military would be testing their operational craft. So as you've said in some of your previous videos, these areas are able to be shared between multiple groups that are performing multiple operations at the same time, at the same day, perhaps over the span of a week. I think some testimony from members of the Princeton's crew say that for the week preceding Fravor's incident with the Tic Tac, they were seeing multiple of these objects on their radar systems going between sea level and 80,000 feet. And I'd like to note that 80,000 feet at the time was the radar ceiling of the Nimitz and the Princeton. So if there was something going above there, if there was something going on above that 80,000 foot height, it wouldn't be able to be seen by the radars of the Princeton or the Nimitz. So if something enters at 80,000 feet, that's just where the Princeton is starting to become aware of that object.
Right. And so do you think there's something emblematic about, I mean, there's no information, obviously, from the from the upper limit from the Princeton, and we have no other sources, that this craft ever exited Earth's atmosphere. It seems to be a craft that operated in air. And it makes sense that it could be a buoyant craft, do you think?
Yeah, the definition of space gets a bit tricky there.
Right.
So I've heard some people in this topic area refer to above 80,000 feet as quote unquote space, but there is still atmosphere above 80,000 feet. Uh, Normal ballooning occurs in the 40,000 to 60,000 to 80,000 feet at the
Right.
sort of extremes. But
Right.
there have been cases where we have done man made balloons or aerostats that have gone up to 170,000 feet. So that's double the service ceiling of the
Oh yeah.
radar.
Yeah.
So if there's a balloon up at 170,000 feet, the Nimitz and the Princeton aren't even going to be aware of it, whether it's friendly or
Right.
friendly technology demonstrator, or
Right.
possibly this is an opposition craft. If the
Sure.
Chinese or the Russians are sending up their balloons, I think the one that transited North America back in 2003 wasn't seen until someone made a visual identification of it over, I think, North Dakota.
Right.
And then it started being tracked. NORAD, I think, had it on their systems when it was in Alaskan airspace,
Yeah.
but that's the observational line of radars at the northern edges of Canada that was doing that detection, not
Right.
any kind of Nimitz Princeton
Oh,
radar.
so what's the advantage of having a craft um, that goes that high? I mean, why would it's above the radar ceiling, but why would you want to fly that high?
Well, we typically send satellites even higher than that. So satellites are orbiting in space outside of the atmosphere above even 170,000 feet. And we're using those to look back down at the Earth. Now, one of the things that these aerostats are used for is observation. One of the key things that the craft that I'm going to explain was tied to the Nimitz incident.
Right.
It was a surveillance craft. So these
Ah,
aerostats were designed to be winched above a submarine that is submerged in the water.
oh, right.
It releases an aerostat under the water
Right.
that is tethered to the submarine.
Hmm.
The buoyancy of the aerostat rises it above into the atmosphere so that
Right.
it's hovering above the submarine with a tether connecting it to the submarine.
Well,
Now it's looking down an area around the submarine to give it a sort of heads up display of what the situation is in the area around the submarine. So
right.
this craft at the time in 2002 to 2004 was called the LASH, and that stands for Littoral Airborne Sensor Hyperspectral. So it is a hyperspectral sensor using multiple spectrums of the electromagnetic emissions
Right.
spectrum to view objects that are both in the air, on the surface of the water, and under the water. And
Oh,
it gives the submarine a enhanced tactical view of the area that it's in.
wait. But I thought possibly one of the bits of misinformation was that we had this alphabet soup of DOE working for the NRO and Nimitz working for US Navy. But if it's a submarine, it must be a Navy asset.
Yes, correct. It would likely have been a Navy asset, and some articles that were released at the time that have since disappeared from the internet, but have surfaced through the Internet Archive,
Ah,
have shown that there was a test of this Lash uh, aerostat occurring in San Diego in 2002 to 2004. That was where these cylindrical white balloons that are deployed from submarines and are tethered to the submarine were being tested.
Okay, so everybody's yelling at their screen now. It's not a balloon, it's swamp gas. No, hang on a minute. You have people have to understand when Joshua just said it's a balloon, he means it's a buoyant craft. It's something that air pressure
Yeah, a
underneath
buoyant aerostat.
a buoyant aerostat. And I often do this. I think I've done it on my YouTube channel and ask viewers, and I'll ask you the question, what's lighter than air? And everybody goes, hydrogen, helium. Well, what's lighter than hydrogen and helium? And the answer is nothing. The most buoyant substance that you could effectively make a balloon float with, because it's buoyant. A buoyant thing is held up by the air pressure beneath it, and it can go to the very top of our atmosphere. As Joshua says, the Earth's atmosphere doesn't stop, it peters out. So there's atmosphere going halfway to the moon almost. I got that wrong, but it's high. That if there is anything underneath a buoyant craft, it will hold it up. And the buoyant craft idea of vacuum filled crafts goes right back to am I correct, 16th century?
Yeah, around 1600,
Wow.
Lana de Terzi first
Mm.
postulated the vacuum balloon. Before that, de Terzi actually cites that Aristotle, which is, I think, 0 BC, had the similar idea of horror vacui, which
Ah,
uh, the vacuum is the absence of space. So Terzi in 1600s credits Aristotle. The modern engineers of this concept are a man named Dr. Miles Bowe at Los Alamos National Labs, and he credits Lana de Terzi as his predecessor of the vacuum balloon concept. However, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base has done their own design of a vacuum balloon that does not use aerogel. It uses a wrapped cylinder that is pressurized, and the pressurized cylinder forms a sphere.
right.
And inside of that pressurized cylinder sphere, you maintain a vacuum. So you're able to
Yeah.
do
Well, the
this with
issue,
aerogel. You're able to
right,
do it with novel materials concepts.
right.
There's a version from NASA's Innovative Advanced Concepts NIAC that uses tensegrity, which is using tension to keep the vacuum balloon in a
Yeah.
very thin-walled craft that is made of a substance called Miralon, which is a carbon nanotube fiber fabric. And so
Great.
there's several of these competing vacuum balloon concepts,
Uh,
but they're all 2019 plus. So this is why I don't think that the Nimitz incident was a US made aeroloy object. I believe that it was a traditional helium balloon called the Lash.
oh,
And that is both due to the confirmation that the Lash was being tested in San Diego in 2002 to 2004, and confirmation from Los Alamos that their testing of the Airloy vacuum balloons was only occurring from 2019 plus. So if this was an Airloy object in 2004,
mm,
it had to be from a unacknowledged program in the US or one of our competitors that had the technology like China or Russia.
just to go over another kind of basic thing that people often ask me and don't really understand. I mean, obviously, a vacuum balloon is a bit like a lead balloon. I mean, because the air pressure would crush it. And that was the downfall of the 16th, 17th century one, is that the containment vessel was heavier than the buoyancy. So it took novel materials, such as the ones that you've mentioned and ones that I'd never heard of before, um, to keep an envelope both not permeable and not crushable. And as you say, in 2019, Los Alamos, who own and run the DOE, who run and own Los Alamos, were working on this novel material, the airloy material, which is I am going to describe as a as a metallic, very lightweight vacuum foam metal material with a cellular structure which contains a vacuum closed cells. But it was probably also wrapped in a metamaterial which would deflect and diffract radar and be white. And all the other thing about it, Joshua told me, and I saw the 2019-20 patent, is that to get any buoyancy out of this type of vacuum cellular structure, it needs to be big. You can't make, there's video, which again Joshua has shared, of the airloy actually working in a bell jar. But to produce anything that can hold that can actually lift a payload, even a small payload, it needs to be I think maybe about 40 foot long, and the ideal shape would be like a giant propane tank or a Tic Tac, and also it would be white. So, I remember you telling me that and going, holy, oh, I get it. But now, Joshua, you're thinking the sighting back at the Nimitz joint use of the MOA off San Diego was a craft called a Lash. Tell us about that. Who
Yeah,
makes
so
it? What is it?
the lash was also by the Department of Energy. It was as I explained earlier, it's a filled helium balloon, an aerostat that
Right.
has a payload underneath it, which is a sensor, a hyperspectral sensor called the lash. So these craft are part of a technology chain. This is the one that existed in 2002. Helium is running out, which is why they're trying to innovate these vacuum craft. Because if you make this craft out of a polyimide aerogel filled with a vacuum, you don't need any helium. You don't need thousands of liters of helium to be pumped into all of these aerostats that are deployed over every submarine in the US Navy's fleet. And they have several of them at the southern US border that are
Right.
also tethered to the ground and act as similar area surveillance
Yeah.
of the border region.
Right.
So as they make more of these helium filled aerostats,
Right.
they're using up the world's supply of helium, which is a difficult to renew resource. You can
No, you
make some
can't. Yeah. It's
yeah,
very
you
hard.
can make a little bit of it in nuclear
Nuclear.
reactions
Right.
and try
Mhm.
to siphon that off. You can separate it fractionally from natural gas distillation,
Right.
but eventually if you're filling up blimps with
Yeah.
millions of liters of helium,
Yeah. Of
we're going to use up all of the world's helium. It's going to vent slowly out of those aerostats and blimps.
course.
And we're not going to have any helium left for running MRI machines or
Right.
any of the other various uses. So the idea in the 2019 region was to switch to trying to innovate these vacuum balloons so that when helium runs out, we can still have these buoyant surveillance
And
aerostats
do you think
for.
there's natural physics advantage of buoyancy of vacuums over a gas-filled balloon? When are they proportionally more buoyant?
The buoyancy is roughly the same. The advantage that you're getting is that one requires literally nothing and one requires
Okay.
thousands of
All right.
liters of helium. So I believe
Sure.
that that's why they're trying to make that switch currently.
As a non-American, as you are as well, I don't really understand who's doing this and why. The Department of Energy, they have laboratories. Of course, they have Los Alamos traditionally did a couple of big experiments in the 1940s, but they also have a big physics laboratory in Chicago. But would they be doing this for another government agency such as the National Reconnaissance Office or somebody like that? the NRO might go to the DOE, because it's nothing to do with national security. Just observations and drone surveillance isn't a national security threat. So it wouldn't be a military thing. Is that where that's why the DOE and NRO are involved? Have I got that roughly right?
Yeah, there's quite a few lettered agencies that are involved in this. If we go back to the 1990s, and it does go back further than that, there was a program in the 70s called Pobol C, or Pobol S,
Right,
which was a large helium-filled aerostat that had solar cells on the top of it.
right,
And in the 70s, we had one of these observational recon aerostats that was buoyant for 30 days in the atmosphere.
right.
So I think if you had asked someone about blimps in the 70s, they'd maybe be able to say, oh, well, you have the Goodyear blimp and that.
Yeah,
But
yeah, yeah. That's
there,
all we
there
knew about.
was
Mhm.
there was this program running inside of the lettered agencies of the government that
Yeah,
was working on these craft for reconnaissance from World War II all the way to the present day. I
yeah.
think that the issue was that they realized that these were used for defense and for reconnaissance, which is
Right.
strongly tied to that. And in about the 1960s, these programs to make more and more advanced aerostats started to become more and more secret within the government as well.
Hmm.
So in the 1990s, you have DARPA working on Project Sentinel, which was a reconnaissance aerostat, and that passed into DARPA's Project Walrus of the 2000s, and that tied in Lockheed Martin, Northrop Grumman,
Uh,
Department of Energy, Los Alamos National Labs, the NRO,
right.
several external to the US companies like,
Right.
as you've mentioned,
Yeah.
BAE. There was some Canadian companies that were
Oh,
involved as well.
right.
So by the 2000s, you're starting to see that it's not just DARPA working on this. They're pulling in all of these national labs and all of these defense contractors to work on more and more advanced reconnaissance aerostats. And uh,
And no doubt
documenting the
the
history of them has been
Oh, well,
interesting.
that's thank you. You've just done that brilliantly. Fantastic research, Josh. Also, I suppose that the multispectral imaging systems or observation systems are continually evolving, and you start hearing about synthetic aperture radar, and now other visual systems which can interpret whole cities and AI and find uh, find things very quickly. So, I mean, police agencies and national, reconnaissance agencies would be using these. And I mean, the other advantage of a buoyant, long-lasting, long-loitering craft is that it long loiters, unlike a LEO or other satellite, which is going to be much higher up. So you're going to have to have better optics and better resolution because it's so farther away. So to be in our atmosphere and to long loiter over an area of interest, as you said, a border, or maybe today, I can imagine these are used in places like Gaza or in Iran. I mean, how do you get those pictures back? Obviously, you can have drones. I mean, flying drones, kind of Reaper type craft or the modern equivalent. But to have a long loitering, 80,000 foot plus object, which is radar invisible and optically invisible, do you think it sends it back to space and then it goes up to come back?
Americas do, yeah. Americas send them up to a network that is called the NRO Sentient, which is an AI analysis of observational data systems.
Yeah,
The aerostats send their signals up to the satellites. The satellites downlink them to, I believe it's Pine Gap and Pituffik in Greenland.
yeah,
They send them on to banks of computers that are owned by the NRO, which
right.
perform analysis on these videos. An interesting part of that, NRO's Sentient, this analysis AI software for reconnaissance, seems to have been one of the feeds for Immaculate Constellation, which was talked about in last year's hearings. There's some FOIA documents on the NRO site, which were requested by John Greenwald, who does excellent work for Black Vault. And that FOIA document for NRO Sentient matches up with one of the observed UAPs that is described in the Immaculate Constellation document that was released by Matt Brown, Jeremy Corbell, and George Knapp. So some interesting tie-ins across all of this technology chain. And
but what you mentioned
think that's how we have to start thinking of it as an entire technology system that's not one craft that we've seen for 100 years. It's an evolving set of technology that we've been catching glimpses of. And as you've mentioned, one of the key things is the sensor technology is what is the classified part to the government. They're not trying to keep balloons and blimps classified from you and me and David Fravor and Alex Dietrich. But in 2002, the sensor that was on the bottom of that Tic Tac, of that lash, was highly classified. The multispectral, the hyperspectral sensor, David Fravor and Alex Dietrich were not allowed to know about the lash because of the sensor that was on the bottom of it. So when they encountered that unknown object and relayed it to the command on their ship, I think there was this misunderstanding where people were saying, well, the commanders didn't seem all that concerned that they had encountered these unknown alien objects. Well, what if the commander knew that that was a test of a reconnaissance? There are certainly, as you said, the people that were responsible for that military operational area would have a better idea than anyone else as to whether there were multiple scenarios going on in that zone at the time. As well, the task force commander of the Nimitz, I would imagine, would have been aware of everything that was going on in that operational area on that day, but that the people under him may not have had a need to know that would grant them the authority to know about the alternate operations that were occurring.
You've got hundreds of people doing an exercise. One radar operator says there's an unknown. Dietrich, Fravor, go over, check it out, let us know what it is. That probably didn't immediately go to the head of chain of command in the Princeton or wherever the admiral was, who would have, as you said, probably have known. But it's worthwhile going to check it out. There's no damage done. But then when they saw it, it's caused all this kind of fuss. And
as we said in the previous video that we've had on this subject, it could have also been a test. They might have wanted to see what an F-18 pilot observed when one of these objects was in the same area, so that they could test whether their jet aircraft and their aerostats interoperated, whether they could see them well, whether...
I agree.
Yeah,
who
could have been a test.
I mean, both Alex and Fravor, Dietrich and Fravor, were top operators. Who better to go and send? But I mean, that's slightly speculative. But let's get to the other point that people really get me on. And they say Fravor saw it traveling horizontally at 40,000 miles an hour. Have you ever heard that reported, that this aerostat or this object, let's just call it the object, ever went horizontal? I thought he only said it went vertical. And how do you account for the speed?
From my recollections of the interviews and testimony that Fravor has given on this subject, when the Tic Tac exited his operational area, it went up. It exited the atmosphere upwards. And then he was contacted by a radar operator on either the Nimitz or the Princeton that said, this object has appeared at your SA. Now, it could have been, as they had said, multiple objects were in the area over a period of days before this incident took place. Nothing says that the object that left and exited up at Fravor is the same as the object that a couple seconds later appeared at the cap. They could have been a submarine sitting under the cap point, raising up its aerostat at the same time as the submarine that's under where Fravor observed it has now lost their aerostat because potentially the tether got severed when Fravor took his very fast jet past a very light and buoyant object and potentially severed its tether and sent it up into space forever.
And it would go above the maximum altitude of the Princeton, so it would appear,
and then it would just pop.
It would have just popped, right? Yeah, that's something that I heard, that one of the end of life uses, or the way of ending these the service life of a drone over an observation area is just to pop it, because it's incredibly high and incredibly lightweight, and possibly people have found very weird debris on the ground. But that would be the best. I mean, bringing it back, winching it back down is only asking for trouble, really. And plus, it's been up there for over Kuwait or Gaza or the border for months. So you just let it go, and there's nothing in it. So it would explode. Is that right?
Well, some companies that do high altitude aerostats do explode them when they are finished their testing. There's a company named JP Aerospace.
Oh, yeah.
They do civilian aerospace exploration. They send balloons up to about 120,000 feet. They take pictures of the Earth. They put science experiments called CubeSats onto them. And when it's done, they explode the balloon and the payload falls back to the Earth where they can recover it.
Right.
There are also aerostats like the Lash that get tethered, so they go up and then they do get tethered back down and recovered.
Right.
Tim Phillips, the former director of Aero, was indicating that he believed that now his most fervent belief now is that the Tic Tac was what he called a WASP. And the WASP is an acronym called the Winch Aerostat Small Platform. But the problem with that for Mr. Phillips is the WASP is only 2022 plus. So how did something that only existed from 2022 plus make it back to the 2004 Nimitz incident?
Right.
I think it's more likely that a predecessor in the technology chain called the Lash that did exist and was tested in San Diego at the time is the more likely candidate of what the Tic Tac was.
It's fantastic, Joshua. I mean, the amount of credit to your incredible research into all this, not only into how it could have worked, but also the as you say, the evolution history of these type of craft and materials. As we've talked a lot about aerogel and aeroloi, which you now think came after. It was another material science to make another variation of these long loitering or winchable drone type things. Tell us about that. I mean, what is it? What is the stuff, and what's the history of it?
So aerogel actually comes from a 1931 patent by a man named Kistler, and he cites his predecessor science as a Danish physicist named Martin Knudsen, who in 1909 was working on gas flow theory. So Knudsen in Denmark was looking at how gases would move through very small tubes. So he had set up these very thin tubes and he was pushing gas through it, and he made a bunch of these flow theory arguments that are known as Knudsen's flow theory, which is the basis of a lot of current gas diffusion models.
Right.
Kistler took that work and was by 1931 able to make several varieties of aerogel out of various metals. He turned an egg into aerogel by removing all of the liquid from it in a supercritical drying. Aerogels continued to be researched in our labs in 1950s. Los Alamos, again, was actually the national lab that was in charge of aerogels research. It goes a bit dark until the early 90s, where we again have it come back out as they've made this process where you can coat the structure of an aerogel with a polymer to make it a more rigid object, which sort of a stronger aerogel that doesn't just fall apart when you touch it.
Right.
And in the 90s, the Chinese steal the aerogel research from the US, and they take it back to China and start their own research projects on aerogels. So if you go back to 1996, you can see that the Chinese are already working on carbon aerogels, which wouldn't be something that the Americans are working on for another couple years yet. So you start to have now two technology chains that are competing, where the Americans and the Chinese have branched off into the Americans continuing the development that they've started, and the Chinese take all of that research and bootstrap their own research chain and start investigating their own ways of making these buoyant aerogel models. And an interesting thing that has happened over the last couple days at the MUFON symposium on Saturday, which has just occurred, Bob Spearing presented a paper where PRA, a research group in Australia, has analyzed a sample of recovered material that MUFON had in its possession. And what they've discovered is that the recovered material is an aerogel. And more so than that, it's an aerogel made of carbon-60 buckyballs.
Yeah.
So if you have these carbon-60 buckyballs and you form them into an aerogel instead of silica or another kind of metal, you get this weird aerogel that I can find no history of this being used in industry or in aerospace. In North America, I can find some early papers that are steering towards it in China, and MUFON themselves wonder whether this may be something that is extraterrestrial that has been recovered and is now being analyzed. So that's an interesting paper that people should look into as well by MUFON and PRA, and Bob Spearing of MUFON would be a good contact person for that.
The buckyballs are fascinating. It's a novel way of joining carbon atoms together that produces a very strong structure by producing a almost like a geodesic dome that joins together with spaces between, but it has inherent strength. So it can be very useful. And sure, it could be a future development of this aerogel. I mean, the other thing that people always yell at me is, I've seen aerogel, you can crush it in your hand. So tell us the difference between this crushable aerogel, which has this history going back to Denmark in the 1930s, and aeroloi. What's this substance aeroloi?
So the typical blue aerogel that you see going back to the 1930s, that if you touch it or if you drop it on a table, it can shatter. It's made of silica, so basically sand. And it's highly crystalline because of its silica nature. and so it doesn't have a lot of strength to it itself.
Right.
It's the most common type of aerogel that you will see referred to by people. So people
Right.
sort of get it in their minds that all aerogels are this blue
Right.
silica aerogel that's very weak.
Mhm.
It's not the case, as I said, even back to 1931, Kistler made aerogel out of an egg, which looked like a dehydrated egg
Right.
that was very lightweight
Mhm.
because all the water has been removed from
Yeah.
the proteins of the egg, and you're just left with
The
a
structure. Yeah.
skeletal shell of an egg uh,
Right.
inside. Um, Alloys
Yeah.
are then made with a polymer. So the one being worked on most recently by Los Alamos National Labs for their vacuum balloon was made of polyimide. So not even a metal, but a
Ah.
polymer itself. So you pour a chemical, it foams up. You
Interesting.
remove the water in a critical drying phase, and you're left with this polymer that is rigid, it is strong, and it is extremely lightweight. Uh, you can also make aerogels out of pretty much anything.
Right.
Normal metals like aluminum can become aluminum aerogel.
Sure.
And all of these different variants of aerogel have their different uses, like various different elements have their various uses.
Probably in the aerospace industry and general engineering industries, and even in things like house insulation and clothing. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
it's a sophisticated subject product. The other thing wasn't aerogel used as as a replacement for a kind of styrofoam material in hydrogen bombs. Yeah, the hydrogen bomb being a cascade of a conventional atom bomb igniting the hydrogen in tritium or whatever it is. Oh, I don't know that. Was often encased in a metal case that needed a foam material. I think that was possibly an aerogel type substance.
It was, and one of the other benefits of aerogel for that specific use is that charged particles move faster than the speed of light
Oh,
in
that's right.
aerogel. So,
Oh,
in the medium of aerogel, when you have these charged particles
right,
moving through that aerogel, they are moving faster than the normal speed of light in atmosphere. So,
right. Yeah,
aerogel has some interesting physics applications to it. I think
right. So
fog bank might be
is
what you're referring to.
aerogel normally evacuated? Are the cellular structure of aerogel, is it normally filled with atmosphere, or is it normally in its production becomes a closed cellular vacuum material? Do you know?
Some of the cells do remain closed, and
Right,
since they are sealed, won't allow normal atmosphere to permeate
right.
the aerogel afterwards. However, most aerogels have connected porosity, so
Ah,
the air will be able to take a mean path back through the aerogel, but because the pores of aerogel are so small, it restricts the flow of air through that aerogel, which can actually be used to form a pump, because if you heat the aerogel up, the
right.
pores become bigger and allow air to flow through the aerogel itself in a more rapid rate.
And that's what you shared with me in the demonstration where
Yeah, we had discussed this a bit in the past.
there's a
And
sample.
back to Martin Knudsen, it's called a Knudsen pump.
Yeah, yeah, and it's fantastic. You actually see this solid substance under a heat lamp in a bell jar actually rising up when you put the heat source on it. So in the case of the of an aerogel vacuum drone, what do you think's inside it? I mean, there's obviously a sensor system, and it's probably wrapped, as I said, in a metamaterial type or a coating, not to keep it not to keep it sealed, but to probably to make it radar invisible and optically invisible. But how do you control an aerogel drone? How do you set the altitude? And can it go up and hover and then change? And how would you alter its altitude? Any idea?
So specifically for an aerogel vacuum drone, you alter the height that it's at by altering the pressure inside the inner chamber. So
Right.
inside of this shell of aerogel, you have essentially a vacuum chamber. And that vacuum chamber can have pressure added to it or removed from it. And the aerogel shell is going to retain that uh, pressure cavity.
Right.
So if you remove all of the gas from the inside of one of these aerogel vacuum shells, it's going to be very buoyant and it's going to raise in the atmosphere to match that buoyancy level. If you then pump air back into the inner vacuum chamber, it's going to become heavier, less buoyant, and it'll descend in the atmosphere. So that's how you go up and down. Additionally, you could add a winch to one of these aerogel things like a normal helium aerostat and use a winch to pull it up and down.
And you can't overestimate how actually sophisticated, very fine, very strong fiber winches are. I mean, look at what's going on. It's not a winch, but look at all this optical fiber drone technology going on in Ukraine, where they can reel out 10 miles or 10 kilometers of fiber optic cable to actually fly a drone so it's not actually affected by EM radiation and be attacked. So winch technology is no doubt very sophisticated and almost invisible, I should imagine. It's not a piece of string, it's not a rope or a chain, it's something probably very advanced materials. And so this type of buoyant craft could easily, if it was less buoyant, hover just above sea level.
Yep.
Right.
So there is that description from Fravor's testimony where he says that it's ping ponging
Right.
above the surface. Now, that description keyed my aerostat tether
Right.
brain to notice that if you had a tether that had just released an aerostat and it was above the water, and you have wind blowing this very light, buoyant
Mm.
aerostat about,
Right.
and the tether is very short. Well, if the wind is blowing it and the tether is holding it in the tethered pattern,
Right.
it's going to ping pong back and forth at the extent of its tether.
Right.
And it,
Yeah,
I,
I get it. I mean, the physics
I
work.
have wanted to do a demonstration of this with a
In a
little
map.
balloon and a fish tank
Right.
and
Well,
a
please
hair dryer.
do it.
Maybe one day I'll get around to doing that, but I think that what you'll see is the extremely light aerostat, the buoyant object, will
Yeah.
get blown about, will ping pong about,
Yeah.
and the tether will hold it to the extent of that ping ponging area.
And then the other big criticism that we've already partly addressed is it then just rises up vertically, but the speed of its ascent is going to be the speed of a balloon. And
Yeah,
why do you think it was seen ascending at faster than that, or descending faster than that? Is there any explanation? You don't
I
know.
don't have any explanation of how it could travel faster than a balloon would ascend.
No.
If it did, I don't have an explanation for that.
Right.
One of the things that was also mentioned in the testimony was that the object was mirroring Fravor's movements.
Yeah.
Uh, I believe that what occurred when he's mentioning that is if you have Fravor's F-18 spiraling down towards this aerostat, when it reaches the aerostat, the bow shock that is being generated by the air that is being displaced by Fravor's F-18, like the wind at sea level, is going to move this very light aerostat around disproportionately quickly. So if you fly an F-18 past a buoyant balloon, the balloon is going to be sucked on and fly back and mirror the motion of your F-18 because it's caught in the turbulent wake that your F-18 is generating. So I think that he mentioned that it was mirroring the movement. I'd like to toss out that if his plane's bow shock, the air that is being displaced by his plane, is what is catching that aerostat and dragging it around in the circle with him, I think that that could be a reason that a immobile aerostat would appear to have sentient understanding if it was just spiraling in the same spiral that his jet had caused it to follow.
So everybody now
and these are just theories from me. If someone takes offense with this, I've had that before. Feel free to debate me. I have open DMs, so
completely.
Let's keep it a discussion.
Yeah, Joshua, we're buggered. I mean, the entire YouTube audience and internet have now got on keyboard warriors and written bollocks to what we're saying, but it isn't necessarily bollocks. We know that these craft exist, and we know that it was in an MOA. The Lash type of buoyant drone is a submarine launched vehicle. It's winchable, and we've talked about some ideas, and we don't know because they don't tell us, do they? You know, that the Navy might have known, but maybe Fravor and Dietrich weren't, and some people on the Princeton sent them out just to go and look at this thing because they'd seen these tests going on. But internet, it's all wrong, isn't it? You know, Joshua is full of shit, and I'm full of shit because it's an alien. Well, it still might be, but I think what we're doing, and Joshua's done, not me. I mean, I've dug into how MOAs operate a little bit, but, you know, it's Joshua's research really into all this stuff. It has come up with a viable human technology. Was it human? You know, who knows? So, Joshua, I give you immense credit for doing this research. I think it's a fascinating material science, and I think it also exposes some lack of communication in the military as well. I mean, whatever it was, if it was theirs, they should have bloody known about it because, you know, it was potentially hazardous to the exercises that were going on in that advanced test area. So thank you very much.
Thank you too, Simon.
You viewers will have hated this because I'm sorry to say this, it slightly burst your bubble. But be open-minded, listen to people doing extremely good work. And, you know, I'm not debunking anything. I'm just looking at evidence. So stay tuned. Thank you very much, Joshua.
Thank you.
Thanks, Joshua. So you are screaming at your screen. Good. Having our paradigm realities challenged is good for us. I can't wait to hear from you. Tell me what you think. Because as a filmmaker, I like to challenge the stories that we are told to believe. Engage and ask questions. Because the truth needs to be out there. Thanks for watching.